Hey guys, this is Paulo with Meditation Amsterdam. Yesterday's video we touched upon this notion of using our mental capacities and powers to double down in the direction of the way things already are, as opposed to using our mind to depart away from the now into either imaginary realities or into a contentious relationship with the way things are. Today, I want to switch gears towards a, a topic that is closer to the mechanism of desire and why the depth of our exploration or the depth of our inner exploration uh, has a direct relationship with the kind of results that we're going to get, into how transformative uh, those results will be or can be, and how sustainable they are over time as well. If we look at the phenomenon of desire in general, you will have noticed that our mind is constantly presenting us with the notion that if only certain things were obtained, resolved, or eliminated in our lives, in other words, if only things were different in a very specific kind of way, then we would come to a lasting satisfaction, right? And so, we may be walking down the street, see an attractive person, and our mind will spring to action saying, well, if you could get with someone like that, then, you would be in this sort of romantic bliss, or you would experience great companionship. If we see someone who's successful or visit a beautiful home, we think, well, if only I work a little bit harder, then my life could be more affluent, for example, right? The same could be said about academic achievement or athletic achievement, for example, or artistic achievement. You take a pick of circumstance or things to acquire, or if I could only get rid of that stupid boss of mine who's has no clue about how to manage people, or I can do the job better than they can, and so on. So the story goes. So the mind presents us with conditions which, if only met, would mean that we can finally be at home in our own skin and at home in the now. It takes a while to catch on to the fact that the game is a game of bait and switch every time around. If you've been around long enough, you can't help but notice that no soon as you acquire the thing that you set out to get, the celebration is, you haven't even stopped celebrating the acquisition, assuming that you got what you wanted. And where the mind is already concocting the next thing that needs to be in place before you can actually get to that final, aha moment, or the relinquishing of your striving and your chasing and your resistance. So it baits us with one thing, switches it into the next, and we systematically and perpetually chase one thing after another. And those things could be very altruistic, by the way, right? They could be very societally approved. We could chase things that a pillar of society would chase, or we could chase things that a loser or someone with who's maladapted might chase. But the chasing is equally present in both, right? It's that sort of driven acquisitiveness for whatever it may be that we think we need. So what to do about this? Right now, we could try to make our wishes and desires more wholesome, right? But if we want to experience more permanent and profound peace, then we want to at some point start to look at the mechanism of want a little bit more closely. Now, the school of Vedanta, which proposes self-inquiry, or in I believe it's Tamil, the language, Atma Vichara, Atmavichara refers to orienting our power of attention towards the primary sense of self, to investigate what it is, what it is made of. And for anyone who's done it for a while, we come to realize that the primary flavor that the self takes is a flavor of what you could call primordial lack. You could also call it archetypal sense of lack or a platonic sense of lack. Whatever it is that we can refer to as pure lack. In other words, not lack of this or lack of that, but just lack in its fundamental form, regardless of what expression it takes, whether it takes an expression towards lack of romantic acquisitions or experiences, or financial, athletic, all the ones that I mentioned, even spiritual for that matter. I remember growing up, I had a cousin who studied respiratory disease, and he talked about the center of cough. And apparently there's a little spot somewhere here, and we're all probably very familiar with it, which, if only ever so slightly tickled, makes us cough whether we want to or not. It's just a reflex. You have to cough. And the center of lack is something similar to that, but it's closer to the heart, all right? And it is the tiny little kernel out of which pure need is felt, and then takes expression in the form of, I need a partner, I need more money, I need to be more authentic, I need to be more autonomous, more assertive, more compassionate. You take your pick. It's like the center of cough makes us cough if slightly tickled. The center of lack makes us want whenever it's slightly tickled. And it's made of pure discomfort. A.H. Almaz, in his book, The Pearl Beyond Price, talks about how the ego, the egoic sense of self, is purely made at its core of the sense of lack. And from there springs an object of desire. So we project an object of desire out in the world when that lack is being felt primordially. And our attention then shoots out of here towards our periphery to try to find ways in which to appease that sense of lack. Unfortunately, the ways in which we try to appease it are unable to appease that sense of lack because it's primordial. The things that we want are only palliative things out there, or mirages or projections that indicate to us that we are feeling lack. If we chase the mirage and we take a gulp of it, all we are doing is taking a big gulp of sand from the environment, which can never satisfy our primordial thirst, our sense of lack. Now, just because our sense of lack projects mirages out there does not mean that real water doesn't exist. And it also doesn't mean that the thirst is actually there. There is a real thirst and there is real water to quench it, but it is not in the mirage that is being projected out onto the world. This is why we always shift from one desire onto the next, regardless of how good we are at satisfying them. So the task and the promise that self-inquiry in fact delivers on is, we set out to find out, what do I mean when I say I, when I say me? So we investigate with our attention what that I-ness, or what the sense of self consists of. And all we ever find is layers and layers of lack of this, lack of that, lack of acknowledgement, and a sort of fundamental having not been acknowledged, say, by our parents or whatever, lack of connection, lack of autonomy, lack of this, lack of that. And the closer we get to the pure sense of self, because all those lacks feels like I lack this, I lack that. The closer we get to the pure I, the closer we get to primordial or essential Platonic lack. It's a wantiness, a neediness that doesn't need an object to be there. It's pure lack. So just like there's a center of cough, there's a center of lack. And it just so happens that because that center of lack is so prevalent in our developmental years, our entire reality is almost funneled through it. So that everything we see is in terms of, will this make me feel better or worse? Craving and aversion. So long as we see the world through a funnel called I, we are seeing reality or picturing reality through a funnel which is fundamentally coming from a sense of lack, you see? And then we try to make the world or coerce the world, or we escape the world, all in an attempt for that sense of lack to be appeased. But it cannot be done through the world. It can only be done through going back in through that funnel and healing the primordial lack out of which the sense I arises. So our task, in essence, when we do self-inquiry, is to keep the eye on the real prize, which is getting to experience lack in its pure, unadulterated form. This is very painful to do. It is excruciating, in fact, because it is very likely that that pure lack was first felt, if not in utero, very shortly thereafter, or perhaps in the cataclysmic event of taking birth, right? Being squeezed and then finding a world in which we suddenly have to breathe for the first time. This is a cataclysmic, very impactful event. And so the lack that our psyche is exposed to in our very early moments of life can be tremendously deep and horrendous to experience. And yet, it is that which drives our lives. It is, as I said, so long as the primordial sense of lack is there and we are identified with it, in other words, consider ourselves to be an I, an individual I, everything that we project onto the world will be only ever seen in terms of, can this make me feel better? Can this bring peace and sustenance to me? Or do I need to push this away because it takes peace and sustenance away from me? And that's a very lopsided way of seeing reality. In fact, we are not seeing reality at all. All we are seeing is threats and potential sources of satisfaction. It's a very narcissistic and narrow, flat, utilitarian view of the world. And primarily, it is a very alienating and disconnecting view of the world. And that primary alienation cannot be satisfied with things in the world. No matter how much we try to make contact on that level, we are making contact with projections and mirages, as opposed to taking the effort and taking the trouble, and it is very, very troublesome, to make contact with our Platonic or primary sense of pure lack, by going into the self-inquiry and using our attention to investigate, what do I mean by I, and noticing that I is always missing something, and that in fact I and lack are one and the very same thing. I is simply the flavor of lack, or the scent of lack. Just like the center of cough produces cough and noise, the center of lack produces selfhood as its noise, with all its thought patterns and all its desires, but that's just the expression of the Platonic sense of lack. So, this is also connected to the previous video about how we, in essence, use the power of our mind to always depart or coerce. right? Disassociation or manipulation, yin or yang, but never to come to terms with the way things are. Coming to terms with the way things are is a very challenging thing to do, because for a while, the way things are will be completely permeated by an subconscious and yet intolerable sense of lack. And that's what we want to come to terms with and come into contact with, that it may be healed. But for a while, it's going to just be there, and it needs to be sustained, I would say, understood, tolerated, felt, and eventually metabolized and alchemically transformed. Bliss and truth are not things we discover. They are things that we learn how to tolerate, because our system cannot handle them in the beginning. And the healing of the primary sense of lack, aka the sense of self, is the rite of passage, if you will, for us to be able to be in touch with what is, with no filters in between. So it's quite a task, actually, but very exciting. And once you get a flavor for it, everything else feels like a huge waste of time, or nice and entertaining, but not fundamental enough. So that is the essence of today's video. It's about the primary sense of lack, how we can dance with it, how self-inquiry, under the guise of taking us closer to our true self, really exposes what we have always been burying behind our sense of individual self, which is the sense of lack in its more pure form. Hope that makes sense. I hope you guys have some cool comments or questions to share on the topic. And if you think that these are worth liking, sharing, and subscribing to, then I invite you to do so. Thanks for watching thus far. I'll be back with more. Thank you. Cheerio and bye-bye.